Hi, Don Klassen here. I want to take a moment to record this video entitled "The Spiritual Lessons to be Learned from Charlie Kirk's Murder." And we all know about the case. 2 weeks ago today, as a matter of fact, he was gunned down at a Utah campus. The supposed gunman is a young man, 22 years old, named Tyler Robinson. And I don't want to, in this video, get too into the weeds about the case itself and the unbelievable circumstances and holes in the official narrative. I want to talk about these lessons from the Bible. But to get there, I'm going to have to talk somewhat about the case to give a context as to why what followed has been so wrong. And so we could begin with, he was shot. The first person, it seems, pretty much to react was the president himself. That night gave a televised address to the nation, and this is what he said, quote, "It's long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequences of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible." You know, that statement alone is enough to make your head explode. If there's anybody who's been more hateful and more demagogic and more divisive the last 10 years in our cultural situation, it's Donald Trump. From his mean tweets to his constant attacking people that don't agree with him as the far, far left, and all these wild accusations backed up by Fox News and all of his supporters. It's just such a hypocritical statement to make. But he continues, "For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now." The response was like it might have been spontaneous, but it might have been coordinated for all I know. There's so many questions about this case that are left unanswered. But the next day, he said this before they even had a suspect. And the next day, there still wasn't a suspect. It wasn't until the end of Thursday night that Tyler Robinson was arrested in his home. His father apparently turned him in, or talked to him, and they agreed he would turn himself in. Now, the next day, all the usual suspects, Steve Bannon, Alex Jones, Jesse Waters of Fox News, were all screaming, "They have declared war on us. This is war." They. Who are the they? They don't even know who did the dirty deed. And here's the important thing to remember about political murders or any kind of crime in the United States. You have the right to hang out with the most radical people and allow them to influence you as long as they're not an outlawed group like a terrorist organization. You can listen to them all day long. And in fact, Charlie Kirk arguably spent his entire career radicalizing college students on the campuses to right-wing ideology like he had and promoted in the guise of Christian principles, mixing the two together. But at any rate, they immediately started attacking their political enemies for being responsible. Well, later that night, Tyler Robinson was arrested, and they still kept up with this. Stephen Miller was screeching that we've got to come down upon these woke college campuses and these leftist groups radicalizing people. You can go to the most leftist university in the United States, and you'll probably find a Republican group on there. You can make a choice as to who you want to listen to, who you want to associate with. It's not a crime. In the United States, unless and until you pick up a gun and you shoot somebody because you don't like their rhetoric, you think it's hateful, whether they think it's constructive criticism or not, you might interpret it as hateful, but that's crossing a line. and you only will be held accountable for that crime, unless there's an accomplice. All the people influencing you are not guilty as part of our free speech atmosphere. Because like I said, one man's hate is another man's constructive criticism. So let's just dispense with all this hyperbole about, hate speech. So hypocritical. For all that last campaign, he campaigned against, I'm going to restore free speech. He even said it in his inaugural address. But when it came to pouncing upon a situation to demagogue it to death, to have an excuse to arrest and intimidate and silence his critics, that's what he chose to do. Now, this case of Tyler Robinson, just as an aside, he only went to one semester at Utah State, hardly a hotbed of liberal activism, and then went to electrician school. Now, one young man from his high school days said if I had to sum him up in one word, I would call him a Reddit guy. That Tyler Robinson spent a lot of time in Reddit, 4chan, these nooks and crannies of MAGA world, right-wing chat rooms and the like. And he seemed to have been influenced by Nick Fuentes Groyper's movement, because in MAGA world, there's two factions, at least two factions. There's Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, more mainstream MAGA. Then you have even more right-wing Nick Fuentes, an open fascist, neo-Nazi, misogynist person he's got 400 chapters of his own on campuses. He's got this group called the Groypers. He's working within the Republican Party to turn them even further to the right. And he looked upon Charlie Kirk as a sellout, a phony, that he wasn't a pure right-winger. And they had a feud going on with him for like 6 years or so. And he has this army of Groypers. And he sent them to the campuses to line up and ask Charlie Kirk these questions. I can't believe that Turning Point USA didn't know about this coordinated attack upon them, but they haven't mentioned a thing about that. Instead, they've gone right along this narrative about leftists having done this and influenced Tyler Robinson. Why? Because the claim is he has a trans roommate, a gay lover situation, and that is supposedly evidence that he was radicalized by leftist ideology, because on the left they're more tolerant of that kind of thing. But the right wing has its trannies and gay people. I mean, just at that memorial service, Grindr, the dating app, quote unquote, or whatever, announced that their servers in Arizona crashed again, just like they did during the Republican National Convention. Because when Republicans get together, apparently there's a lot of closeted gays that get together for their trysts and things. So the only people they have left to really demagogue and pick on are the trannies, which, I agree. This country is so neurotic about sex issues and am I a boy, am I a girl, and all these sorts of things. But what are you going to do to change that? You're going to pass laws, you're going to persecute them, you're going to target them for destruction. What are you going to do to change people? This is just a convenient excuse for somebody to pick upon who's powerless and who can't fight back, by and large. Okay, like I said, we could go into the weeds about this case and all the holes. The bullet casings had these weird cryptic inscriptions that trace back to the Groyper gaming world that look like they're anti-fascist, left-wing type sayings. The whole thing is very fishy. Even Candace Owens has been speculating as to whether this was an Israeli hit, because in Charlie Kirk's last couple of months he was turning against Israel, slowly at first, but they pressured him so hard he began to wonder. He asked more questions, and if Israel had lost Turning Point USA's allegiance, their states was practically going to be gone. With the unpopularity that they have at this point. At any rate, and God's ultimate purpose is to to take us to Israel and to Armageddon. That's a whole other subject, but at any rate, there's a lot of the text messages supposedly have no timestamps. They sound like they're written by a 40-year-old cop, someone's suggested, talking about my vehicle is parked somewhere, squad cars, drop points, my love, and all. It just sounds so phony. And yet, and I'm just not expecting, I'm not going to hold my breath, waiting for this Justice Department to get to the bottom of this. They just want a demagogue. Charlie Kirk's memory. And his memory in the eyes of many people is mud, because he was a very bombastic, bigoted, insensitive, ignorant person in many ways, with outrageous opinions about all kinds of stuff. I found him very embarrassing as a Christian. I thought of him as a Pied Piper of youth, and extremely valuable to the Republican Party, the Trump administration, and to Israel. And that's why this was so volatile. Well, at any rate, let's get into the spiritual principles here, because that's more important than anything. Because what are we to learn from this? Because apparently we've been told that leftists are our enemies, and that they're the ones that had to be tracked down and eliminated, the removal of evil and wickedness and all this. These are the fish we're supposed to be catching as part of the Great Commission at the end of the age. Yeah, this is so absurd, and all this lather of rage is just designed to go after Trump's enemies. And so, what exactly, though, are some of these spiritual principles? Sorry for the delay here. Okay. Here's number one. Let's just start with the 9th commandment of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. This is not just a commandment to not lie about other people. It's a commandment to not even distort what they're saying or who they are. It's an exhortation to try to be as fair-minded as you can toward others, knowing that there's 8 billion people in the world. We don't have the time to get to know everybody. And so whatever opinion you have, make sure that it's as fair as possible. Make sure your judgment is proportionate. Rather than this constant diet we're subjected to every day of demagoguery, of distortion, of scapegoating of people, of straw man arguments, of stereotyping people, and not listening to what they're saying. Because in the United States, we have the right to disagree. In fact, in a democracy, it takes two parties. There's always going to be a liberal party and a conservative party, because it's like two sides of your brain. The other side is not your enemy. They're just a different way of looking at life. And every day we go through decisions that we make that are sometimes conservative, sometimes liberal, depending on who we're talking to, what we're dealing with, how we're feeling, all kinds of factors. But everybody's that way. At any rate, so the 9th commandment is just, in our time, is just the slander and the distortion. I'm coming out of Fox News. It's just ridiculous every day. They take a story, blow it out of proportion, twist it around, make it sound like it's something happening everywhere. Trump's talking about cities on fire and all this crime and all this is hysterical language. Right now, the nation of Indonesia is literally on fire. They're having such political turmoil right there. They're on fire. Our cities are not. Not yet, at least, unless he has his way. Because he's such an incendiary, wicked tongue. But at any rate, the 9th commandment is just for starters. There's also the principle of an eye for an eye. Now, Donald Trump has very famously said many times that whenever anybody crosses me, I hit him back 10 times harder. 10 times. So in other words, according to him, it's not an eye for an eye anymore, it's 10 eyes for an eye. And even worse, that phrase in the Old Testament did not mean that if someone had their eye gouged out, they bring the perp before the judge and they gouge out his eye too. The idea was let the punishment fit the crime. No more, no less. Now, there's supposed to be a sense of proportionality in how people reconcile criminal or upsetting conflicts between people. That's what a judge does. It's that symbol of the woman who's blindfolded, she doesn't have any prejudices, and she's holding a balance scale. That's a symbol of justice or righteousness in our society. And we have this system whereby we try to find the truth, to get to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Like Jesus said, the truth shall make you free. The truth, not your opinion, not your interpretation of hate, but the truth about the facts of a matter. That's how our justice system works, which he hates because he's a lifetime criminal. But he cynically thinks and conveniently thinks that everything is political power mongering, that everything is persecution, that it's not really an act of justice when people do their job. But at any rate, okay, number 3, sowing and reaping. You can make the case that Charlie Kirk was a victim of his own preaching, in that he was a big supporter of the gun culture that ended up someone from that culture killed him. This man, Tyler Robinson, was steeped in gun culture. He wasn't just from a Republican family. He was from a MAGA family up to its eyeballs in guns. I saw a picture of him when he was a boy holding an unbelievable combat rifle, and when he was older, a grenade launcher and behind a 50 caliber machine gun. So he's been probably shooting since he was a boy, and that's why he was so accurate, if indeed it was him that did the shot, because there's so many anomalies about this case. You know, you can't disassemble that gun very easily. It takes a screwdriver. You know, it's just not something simple you can do and put it in the bag and jump off a building. But at any rate, there's always questions about this sort of thing. But any rate, Charlie Kirk was a big promoter of the Second Amendment, and they asked him one time, well, what are you going to do with these school shootings where these kids go to school and they get gunned down, even little children? And his answer was, it's a price you have to pay for some of that in order to have the right to the Second Amendment to protect yourselves from our freedoms, that sort of thing. And they asked him further about it. He said, well, the answer is more guns. I'm not sure what he means by that. Are the kids supposed to be packing guns too? Or the teachers? Or what is he talking about? But you know, that was his whole part of his thing. And you know, the thing about MAGA world is that, and the Republican Party, is that they have a virtual monopoly on gun culture and gun fetishes in this country. Like one liberal parent said, we don't raise our kids this way. We raise them to tolerate other people and to be kind and empathetic to them, to understand the marginalized. We don't, are not loaded for bear to shoot people that we don't agree with. So, you can make that argument, and that's sowing and reaping. So, why is that so hard to consider that possibility? Only God really knows. But, I think that that's something that's worth looking into or considering. He made $21 million, by the way, I think in his short 13-year career, from rich Republican backers. Now, here's a couple of scriptures regarding sowing and reaping. This is from 1 Peter 2:20, where it says, "For what glory is it, if, when ye be buffeted for your faults, ye shall take it patiently? But if, when you do well and suffer for it, you take it patiently, that is acceptable with God." In other words, even if you suffer for your faults and take it patiently, they're not even taking it patiently, let alone maybe suffering for their faults. In fact, in chapter 4, Peter elaborates more on this principle in verse 15. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. By the way, Charlie Kirk, was always lecturing women about what they ought to do, and how men ought to be they should be an appendage on a man's life, and it was interpreted by people as you're being pretty much of a busybody here, and that might have been unfair or something like that, but that's how he came across. And Trump, oh my God, he sticks his nose into everybody's business, including people he thinks have no talent and low ratings. It's obvious what eats him up is that he doesn't get that kind of adulation like Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert or even Charlie Kirk. 200,000 people showing up for his memorial. And he couldn't help but comment on, the crowds, because he's obsessed with ratings. But he's such a busybody, sticking his nose in everybody's business, and doesn't understand apparently how offensive that can be. But at any rate, it goes on. It says, a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if a man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. And so again, if you suffer according to the will of God and commit yourself to the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing as unto a faithful creator. That's not the reaction I saw. I saw people loaded for bear to try to go out and just go after whoever they are, before our justice system determines who did this dirty deed. That is so un-American. If you don't like it this way, go move to Russia then, where you're an oligarch, you're out of favor, they'll push you out of a window, or you get shot in the street, or you get poisoned, or sent to a penal colony. See if you like it then, because that's an autocracy. That's why he admires Putin and Russia so much. That, between the fact he's so compromised by them, with probably sex videos, along with bribes he's taken from them, and maybe also with Israel, with compromat that Epstein sold to them. At any rate, so that's part of the principles of, like, how do you respond to doing the right thing and being persecuted? Is that you take it patiently. That's acceptable with God. I'm not seeing that in this thing. I'm seeing a lot of self-righteousness and a lot of rage that he is trying to weaponize. Number 4, hypocrisy. I mentioned about Grindr crashing every time Republicans get together. Trump also takes money from Putin, I would assume. And I think right-wing Christianity loves the trans issue because it's their righteousness talking. At least we're not like those people. We're good, God-fearing, church-going Americans. And that's not the gospel. The gospel is a personal walk, a spiritual walk with God, which is likened to a marriage, for better or for worse, and wherein he increases and we decrease. We bite the bullet, we die to ourselves every day. We don't use God like an ATM machine for prosperity or political power and all these carnal pursuits that are not part of the gospel. I don't know why that's so hard for people to accept, but they just are so badly taught, I guess, nowadays. And I understand, people on the left, they can't be woke to a point of annoyance. And want silence people with hate speech. That's where this largely began, using the N-word when it's very commonly used in black community themselves, and or pronouns and all these other things that are so annoying to people, but they're not the main and plain things of politics. Politics is about 4 things: money and power and war and peace. Those are the issues that the big players care about. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is little shiny objects to play in front of your eyes to get you distracted on your own personal pet grievances. And you're being pickpocketed and robbed by the same party that they're buying up everything. Their idea of free speech is money talks, everybody else has no right to an opinion. It's exactly what's going on right now. Like also, as I mentioned, Tyler Robinson may have simply hated Charlie Kirk for his brash dismissiveness about a subject he took seriously, regardless of his own political philosophy. And if he was angry at Kirk, it may have been from the right-wing perspective, the Groyper perspective, that he was insensitive to he was into all these furries and I think like furry porn and gamer type lingo and this and that. I mean, it's a very, very subtle world that they are part of that I was unaware of, and the kind of language they use, this kind of stuff. So like he may have been motivated by that as much as by any kind of leftist influence. So we just don't know, we'll probably never know, because it's too embarrassing to the Trump and the MAGA world. It's a big feud within their own ranks. And well, maybe in a future video I can talk about how that will probably play out, but at any rate. And all these demands, we revere and love the memory of Charlie Kirk like we're in some kind of new inquisition now, because one man's hate is another man's legitimate criticism. And one small example of this, well, besides, before going there, a lot of people lost their jobs because they made statements or opinions about their revulsion at everything Charlie Kirk stood for, even in that sensitive time when his wife and children are grieving, because it's absolutely tragic. Those little children are left without a father now. Everybody understands that. We all agree that, you know, political violence, I think most of us hopefully agree, has no place in our discourse, but it happens all the time. And most of it's coming from the right wing. You know, one big Trump supporter gunned down the Speaker of the Assembly of Minnesota on June the 14th, Donald Trump's birthday, when he was having that military parade in Washington, and there was a lot of No Kings protests around the country that day. And he had a list of almost 70 names of people, prominent political officials, that he was going to gun down. He impersonated a cop, showed up at their door, killed them, and was off to another thing when he got eventually caught. But he was a big Trump supporter. After a week of the Minnesota authorities investigating it and having this guy in custody, the federal FBI or whatever swooped in, pulled rank on them, took the suspect, and made it a federal case. You'll probably never hear the end of it, or never get to the bottom of it, and you'll never hear again who he's aligned with, because it's all about the left, the left, the left. The hypocrisy is just stunning. It's through the roof. But one more thing I wanted to mention. This is just so typical of Trump. And at that memorial, he was describing some situation where Charlie Kirk was on a campus, and he was getting all this protest against him from left-wing activists. And he said, Trump said that they had these pre-printed signs. These weren't made by, you know, a magic marker in the basement type thing. Someone was paying for that. And he said that in the middle of a stadium full of people with not just printed placards that they were holding, but cordoned off into sections. With one message in one section, another message in another section. Someone paid for that too. And what's next? You know, midnight pageantry and torches and marches, torchlight processions, goose stepping. This has all happened before in history, when that hysteria gets worked up into a lather and all of our constitutional rights are forgotten. And, you know, this battle between Western democracy and autocracy is raging right now in the world. And people like Peter Thiel he has come to the conclusion, this multi-billionaire, this tech bro guy, who is the big financier of J.D. Vance, has concluded that democracy and freedom are incompatible now. Oh, well, thank you so much for your insight, because the rest of the world doesn't believe that. And they value their freedoms, which are guaranteed only by a democracy, where the people, we the people, government of, by, and for the people, like Lincoln said, are in control. We decide who our leaders are. They don't decide who they're going to target. They have a trust that they're given. They better carry it out faithfully, or they're not listening to the God of the Bible that I know. At any rate, there's more I could probably dig up in the Bible about spiritual principles and lessons that, it's all in there. It's just how you interpret it. It's how you see it. So please don't be naive and just listen to what people tell you, and what seems to be an orchestrated campaign to brainwash you, to cause you to check in your brain at the door and throw away your freedoms for a momentary emotional tsunami whereby you have to revere the memory of someone that you don't even believe in at all. That is so oppressive and tyrannical, it's unbelievable. And this is the reputation you want to have. No wonder, that you want to legislate people into submission, because you're not winning them over evangelistically. That's for sure. Whatever happened to the Great Commission in the end of the age? At any rate, I do thank you for listening, and I'll come back with more videos as soon as I can. Thank you, and have a great day.